What's up, Giants fans, Hub watchers, YouTube subscribers, Twitter and Instagram followers? It's your boy Noname back at it again with another New York Giants video. This time, the second user-selected video from the community polls. You guys voted, and it was loud and clear. You guys voted for me predicting the stats of key players in the 2020 season for the New York Giants. Although a good amount of people voted for the different methods of rebuild, which one is better, which one is worse, I might do that in the future. It might come up on the next user selected poll, who knows, but a good amount of y'all voted for that, so it's definitely in my mind. So shout out to all you guys. This video is here because of you. You guys really do decide some of the greatest content on this channel. And quickly before we get into it, I did not do the key stats for defensive players in this video simply because when I finished the offensive players for the video, it already was going to be around like 20-30 minutes long, and to include the defensive players would just made it way too long. And also, the defense as of right now is not as set in stone as the offense is, in my opinion. I think everybody on the offensive side for the starters, every position basically except for center, we know who it's going to be, versus on the defensive side, there's still kind of, if you want to call it controversy or whatnot, but there's still not a solid set in stone positions in the secondary and for the pass rushing side, because we don't know if Golden is going to come back yet, even though it might seem like he might. And even if he does come back, who's starting? Is it going to be him and Fackrell? Is it going to be him and Carter? Not sure yet. There's just a lot of factors on the defensive side. I'm going to wait to sort out, and maybe if I do a predicting the stats of the defensive side of the ball in the future, it's going to be later down the line in the offseason. That being said, sit back, get warm, sit tight, get your popcorn, whatever it is, and let's hop into it. So, here we are, predicting the stats of the key players of the New York Giants in the 2020 regular season. First player up, Saquon Barkley. Possibly the most important player on offense, and definitely the player I expect to be the main focus point of the offense. The offense is literally going to run through Saquon. The first player up, somebody that I think could win MVP, is personally my MVP pick for the 2020 season. If you guys haven't seen that video, go check it out. I made it like last month. And let's get into Saquon, man. First of all, let's take a look back at his rookie and sophomore season. His rookie year, he had 261 rushing attempts, 1,307 rushing yards, 11 rushing touchdowns, 5 yards per attempt. And then on the receiving side, 91 receptions, 721 yards, 4 touchdowns, averaging 7.9 yards per reception. He played 16 games in 2018 and started 16 games in 2018. The reason I state that, of course, is because in 2019, he had the sophomore slump, which was mostly caused by his injury where he missed games. Saquon, of course, had 217 rushing attempts, 1,003 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, and 4.6 yards per attempt on the rushing side in 2019. And then on the receiving side, also a decrease to 52 receptions, 438 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, averaging 8.4 yards per reception. That being said, I think we all expect Saquon to have a bounce back year this year. Say that we came back with the same roster, there was no improvements, no decrease, just the same exact roster as what the Giants returned with in 2020. Saquon was still going to have a bounce back year. He's got another year under his belt. He finally recovered from basically the first injury in his career. Hopefully he doesn't turn out to be an injury prone guy, knock on wood, I don't expect him to be. And nevertheless, the line we would have come back with in 2019 is still better than the line we had in 2018. So Saquon, I think everybody would expect, would have a better statistical year in 2020 than he did in 2019 and 2018. Now, of course, the offensive line did improve, and the team in general on the offensive side did improve. I've said it many times, and I really do believe it. Saquon can be an MVP, and this offense has top 10 potential. That is something I wholeheartedly believe in. Why is that? First and foremost, the new offensive coordinator, he's going to be playing with the coach Jason Garrett that absolutely loves to run the football and put a focal point on controlling the clock and opening up deep passing and vertical routes through running the football and having his offensive linemen absolutely, basically dictate the way the game is going to go. He's also on a Giants team that, even without Jason Garrett here, is constructed to run first. And he finally has an offensive line that can actually facilitate that. We know who our 2 tackles are going to be. At the very least, one of our tackles is going to be a really good player in the NFL in Andrew Thomas, has potential to be great and elite. We have two great guards in Hernandez and in Zeitler. The only position in question is the center position, but when you got 4 out of the 5 guys there, the offensive line is a sum of its parts rather than the whole thing. Your offensive line is going to perform very well because they're all going to end up helping out each other. So I mentioned Jason Garrett. How does this guy lead us to be a top 10 offense? Well, let's take a look back at what he did with former running backs, especially in the past 4 years or so. Let's look at Ezekiel Elliott and his stats. And as we all know, Ezekiel Elliott, since entering the league, has not only been in a better suited offense for himself with Jason Garrett. Of course, once again, Garrett runs the ball more than our previous head coach in Pat Shurmur, but the offensive line in Dallas is one of the best in the league. That, without a doubt, will help out your running back no matter who it is back there. Saquon hasn't had either of these things. And we look at Ezekiel Elliott's stats, it tells an interesting story. In 2016, his rookie year, he had 322 attempts for 1,600 yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. 2017, the outlier year because he was suspended. I think it was either 6 or 8 games. He had 242 attempts for 983 yards, with 7 touchdowns. 2018, 304 attempts for 1,400 yards, 6 touchdowns. 2019, 301 attempts for 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns again. What are you noticing here? His numbers are better, but that's expected. Like I mentioned, the better offensive line. But what you can see is that he's always gotten a lot more carries and a lot more rushing attempts than Saquon Barkley. Ezekiel Elliott, excluding the 2017 year because he was suspended, whenever he's in there as the main guy, he's always gotten at least 300 rushing attempts. Way more carries than Saquon, and that's on a consistent basis, but he hasn't matched the production of Saquon. And you guys might be saying, wait, what do you mean with that? Well, let's look at the 2017 year. He had 242 yards, 242 attempts, but only 983 yards. Last year, Saquon had 217 attempts, but 1,000 yards. So obviously, one thing that Saquon is doing better is he's averaging more yards per carry, than Ezekiel Elliott with a worse offensive line, and is producing more total yards than Zeke. And Ezekiel Elliott as a Cowboys running back is not exactly an outlier in terms of production. Obviously, the guy almost every year is in the conversation for rushing leader. You can go back to when Jason Garrett was actually the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys, and their rushing attack always had at least 1,300 yards every year. So we look at Saquon now, better offensive line than he has ever had before. A coach that's gonna absolutely run the offense through him, and him being poised for a bounce back year. This is what I see for Saquon in terms of rushing numbers. I think he's gonna get 315 rushing attempts with 1,512 rushing yards combined with 12 rushing touchdowns. That's averaging 4.8 yards per attempt. Absolutely monster season by Saquon Barkley. He for sure is going to be in the conversation for the rushing leader, if not the rushing leader in the NFL. And his receiving numbers, this is the one interesting part. His receiving numbers might actually look a bit closer to what it was in 2019 because Dallas never really throws to the running backs that much. Then again, they've never had a talent like Saquon that can actually catch the ball. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm still going to lean on the more conservative end for the receiving numbers, where I said he has 75 receptions for 607.5 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, averaging 8.1 yards per reception. Nevertheless, with the step back in receiving numbers, he's still going to have a monster season. And this is something that I actually think is very, very realistic for Saquon Barkley and the Giants. Now, when you have such a potent rushing attack, you could only expect the passing attack to be potent as well. So let's move on to the next guy, the second and the other main guy in this offense, Daniel Jones. First, a quick recap of his 2019 stats. He had 459 passing attempts for 284 completions. That's a completion percentage of 61.9% for 3,027 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, averaging 10.7 yard per completion. And his rushing stats, 45 rushing attempts, 279 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 18 fumbles, and 6.2 yards per attempt. Now, of course, a couple caveats on the 2019 season. First and foremost, it was his rookie season. Mistakes are what you expect more than anything. For a rookie to have this type of season at all is very impressive. But he also did this in limited time. Daniel only started 12 games for the Giants and played in 13, even though that 13th game was basically like as time expired week 1 against Dallas. His offensive line did not do him any favors. He got sacked 38 times last season, which led to the Giants losing 297 yards just by sacks. Daniel also threw the ball a lot for the Giants, as they were almost always playing from behind in their games, causing the passing game to be a lot more, used a lot more heavily. This is what kind of led to him having the monster 300, plus yard games with 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. He had 3 or 4 of those in his rookie season, which no matter, you take out the context, you put in the context, it doesn't matter. It's extremely impressive. But the reason for that is because when you average out and you crunch the numbers, Daniel was throwing the ball basically 38 times a game last year, which is not something, whether you're in a rushing offense or not, it's not something that you want your quarterback to be doing. That's a lot of times per game. That's almost way too much. I think the Giants are going to want to limit him, Joe Judge, Jason Garrett, I think they're going to want to limit him to maybe 25, an average of 25 passing attempts per game or something like that, or maybe 25 completions per game. Obviously, it's not going to work out as perfect as that. There's going to be games where he's going to play from behind. This team is not ready yet to take the next step. They're definitely going to be behind in a couple of these games, but I think they want to keep it around that 25 mark, maybe 30, but they definitely want to bring it down from 38, which is too much. On the other hand, one thing you can expect to increase for sure is the yard per completion number, as with Garrett's Air Coryell system, the passing game is very vertically inclined, and what you do is you target the speedy or big, or maybe even a combination of speedy or big receivers downfield, and you target the tight ends that might be downfield and coming across the numbers. So guys you should expect to flourish in the system, we're talking Darius Slayton, Evan Engram, and Caden Smith, or maybe not Caden Smith, whoever ends up being the backup receiving tight end. But those are really the 3 guys you should look at to have a monster season this year. So what do I predict Daniel Jones to have in this offense that really I think is going to help him out a lot? He's going to, you think about better offensive line, him taking a step forward in year 2 as quarterbacks do, him working out in the offseason, gaining more pounds, working on his fumbling issues with David Cutcliffe. The dude has been nothing but improving this offseason. I expect him to be have 520 attempts, 325 completions for a completion percentage of 62.5%, 4,092 yards, 31 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, averaging 12.79 yards per completion. Now for me, that's an amazing season for Daniel Jones, and a lot of people might be expecting me or might have wanted him to have something around like 4,500 passing yards or something like that, or something even more monstrous. But the thing is, I really do believe they're going to try and cut down on his passing attempts because they want to run the offense through Saquon. They want to run the ball into the ground. It's going to do a lot of things for them in terms of opening up that passing game and resting the defense. But they also want to try and limit the amount of times Jones is going to get hit. I believe in this offensive line. I do think it's fixed, but he's going to get sacked regardless. You want to prolong his career and also reduce the fumbling, which, by the way, this is an expectation that I have for Daniel Jones. I do not want to see more than 11 or 12 fumbles from Daniel Jones next year. In fact, I might be a little peeved if he gets in the double digits of fumbles because of how much he's worked on it and how much they've improved the offensive line. He really should not be in the double digits of fumbles next year, and I will be disappointed if he is. But that's another thing they want to do. Reducing the passing attempts obviously reduces the amount of times he can fumble. But this is a great second season for Daniel Jones. You're talking 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. Amazing season from him. The rushing stats is where it gets a little bit harder to predict though. I think his rushing is going to come from more scrambles and actual designed running plays. Going back to them wanting to protect him, and his mobility is definitely an asset, but they're going to want him to use it only when necessary. So I'm not particularly sure what his rushing stats is going to look like. To be honest with you, this right here is something kind of a shot in the dark. I said 50 rushing attempts, 320 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 11 fumbles, and 6.4 yards per attempt. So I still do have him with the fumble numbers in the double digits, but I want it to be 11 fumbles at most. That's kind of my pessimistic take on it. And honestly, with a passing attack like that and a rushing attack like I mentioned from Saquon Barkley, this offense should be, fringe top 10 in the league. We're talking, let's talk about the combined offensive yards there. You're talking 5,500 plus yards and 45 plus touchdowns at the very least. I think that's good enough to get, top 15 for sure, maybe fringe top 10. So who is Daniel Jones going to be throwing the ball to? Well, like I said, Darius Slayton, who was of course a breakout receiver for the Giants in 2019, where he was targeted 84 times, had 48 receptions, 740 receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns, 15.4 yards per receptions with a catch percentage of 57.1%, my bad. Now, this was also in limited action, kind of like Daniel Jones. Slayton only played in 14 games and only started 9. He didn't really start to see the field until the Vikings game, and then he didn't even start to break out until halfway through the season. And I think everybody kind of agrees his real breakout game was against the Jets, which was like week 10. But Slayton was by far the quickest learner and the player that progressed the fastest on the Giants last year. He went from coming into the mini camps as a guy that couldn't even hold on to the ball to going to basically a fringe #1 receiver that has really safe hands and is a good deep threat. And Slayton is currently the only legitimate outside deep threat on the Giants receiving core. So I really do expect him to be one of the main, if not the main target for Daniel Jones. So for sure, you're talking a combination of him actually starting all 16 games, fitting into the offense very well, and other receivers bound to get injured. I'm talking Sterling Shepard and Evan Ingrams of the world. I do expect Darius Slayton to have a huge year too, and maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, but this is what I got for him. 130 targets, 77 receptions, 1,193.5 receiving yards, 12 receiving touchdowns, averaging 15.5 yards per reception with a 59% catch percentage. Now, the catch percentage was kind of difficult to predict. I really don't know how that's going to go. He's only had 1 year in the league. His catch percentage could go down, it could go up, but I think somewhere around this is what we can expect from Darius Slayton. Of course, and I probably should have mentioned this in the beginning, the way I'm basing these numbers is I'm going back from the past 4 years of the Cowboys offense, but also 2007 to like 2010 when Garrett was really in control of the offense. And I'm looking at those receiving numbers, the quarterback numbers, the running numbers, and then I'm looking at the Cowboys numbers the past couple years, and then I'm looking at these Giants players numbers from the past couple years. I'm kind of cross-referencing all of it to try and get a realistic interpretation of what can happen. Then the #2 guy in terms of receiver for this offense is going to be Evan Engram, which I don't know how to feel about, but it's a fact. The Air Coryell system under Garrett relies on their #1 receiver and their tight end. Those are the two guys. Their tight end is basically a wide receiver, and they have almost always had, whether it's by one tight end or a combination of 2 or more, at least 900 to like 1,000, 1,100 yards from the tight end position in this scheme. Now, of course, Engram from 2017 to 2019 has always been injured, and I'm going to throw up his stats here. You guys can see all of his stats decrease. You're talking from 723 yards in his rookie year to 577 to 467 last year. Why was that? Because he's just gotten more and more injury prone, and he's been in less games in the past couple years. He went from playing in 15 games in 2017 to 11 in 2018 to 8 in 2019, and it felt like less than 8 last year, if I'm going to be honest with you guys, because of the amount of time he saw the field. But his injuries keep getting worse and worse, and he keeps missing out on more and more games. I do fully expect these injuries to continue. By this point, I think we all know what kind of player Evan Engram is. He's a lethal weapon and one of the best tight ends in the league when healthy, but he gets injured way too much to actually be that on the field consistently. I still expect him to be one of the main guys, and I still expect him to be heavy utilized as a tight end. The problem is, I don't know when he's going to get injured. So to kind of make it a little bit easier on myself, because I was really tearing my hair out kind of to see what is a realistic day this dude is going to get injured, but there's absolutely no way to predict that. I'm just going to say, let's say Evan Engram plays half of the season, right? Let's just say he plays 8 games, which is basically what happened in 2018, but he's going to have better stats because the ball is going to be headed his way a lot more. So what I did is I projected his stats as though he was going to play 16 full games, and then chopped it in half so that one half is going to go to Engram for 8 games and the other half is going to go to the rest of the tight end receiving core, whether that's going to be Caden Smith completely picking up where Engram left off, or a combination of Caden Smith and Toyolo, or a combination of Caden Smith and Golden Tate for all we know. But the half of the stats that's not completed by Engram is basically going to go to the rest of the receiving core. So this is what I had for him. If he played a full 16 games, it would be 110 targets with 76 receptions, 950 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns, 12.5 yards per reception with a 69 completion percentage to Evan Engram. So yeah, basically sliced it in half because I think he's going to play around 8 games or so. And that's what you're going to get for his projection next year. Now, I know it's not perfect, but it's the best that I could come up with in this situation. So for our two remaining receivers, or at least our two remaining starting receivers in Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate, this offense is going to be strange for them to operate in. Dallas, when implementing it, does not really target their slot receivers that much. All you got to do is look to Cole Beasley and why he left Dallas in the first place. And obviously, they're not going to be targeted nearly as much as they were last year, and in terms of Sterling Shepard, previous years with the West Coast style of offenses the Giants have ran. So I expect the receivers not to necessarily take a step back this year, but the way they're going to be used is going to be very different, and they'll definitely be seeing, less balls headed their way. I do want to say, I still believe both of these guys are extremely underrated receivers, especially Sterling Shepard when it comes to route running and catching the ball. And honestly, both of them, they have the potential to be 1,000-yard receivers, but it's just not going to happen in this system. So if we take a quick look back from 2016 to 2019, Shepard's career here, in 2016, where he was fully healthy, started all 16 games and played in all 16 games, he was targeted 105 times, got the ball 65 times for 683 yards and 8 touchdowns. 2017, his first season where he was really injured, he started in 10 games, played in 11, had 84 targets, 59 receptions for 731 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then in 2018, once again fully healthy, both played and started in all 16, 107 targets, 66 receptions for 872 yards and 4 touchdowns. And of course, last year, his worst statistical year because he was out for a lot of it. He both started and played in 10 games, was targeted 83 times, received 57 of those targets for 576 yards and 3 touchdowns. So of course, we all know Shepard kind of has an injury history, but I think it does slip our mind that he has had seasons where he's played, full 16 games. He's not exactly Evan Engram when it comes to injuries, but I do think he'll manage to stay relatively healthy this season for 2 reasons. The first one being, once again, unlike the West Coast systems where the slot receiver is used a lot, the slot receiver is honestly targeted probably the most, if not one of the most on the team. Shepard is not going to be targeted that much. He's going to be the 3rd receiving threat on this team behind the tight end and Darius Slayton. So that's a lot less, opportunities for him to get hit, for him to break something, for him to get a concussion. And because there's going to be less passing opportunities in general because it's a run-first team, once again, a lot less opportunities for him to get hit and something to go wrong. But also, and this is kind of superstitious, you kind of look at the years, man, he seems to stay healthy in the even years. I know it's kind of a stupid reason, but hey, maybe there's something to that. But both Tate and Shepard will be moved around from the inside and the outside of the slot. I think Tate will be the guy that's going to be the main slot receiver due to his age and him. When you compare his performance on the outside to Sterling Shepard, I think Shepard is just a little bit better. This is what I have for Sterling Shepard's stats next year. 100 targets, 62 receptions, 744 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, 12 yards per reception with a 62 catch percentage. So it's not exactly like Shepard's going to be a complete scrub in this offense. Like I said, I think he's going to be a bit more on the outside than Tate. They're going to move around a bit, but because he's going to be a bit more on the outside rather than Golden Tate, he is going to see, some balls thrown his way. And 744 yards, that's not bad. That would be his 2nd best receiving season, right behind, I think, 2018. Now, is this going to happen? I have no idea. I'll be honest with you guys. Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate were the 2 hardest players for me to try and project anything on this year, just because I don't know how they're going to be used. And with Shepard, while I do expect him to be healthier this year, I don't know. The dude could possibly retire. Who knows what's happening with him? He's still contemplating whether or not he wants to actually play football. And same goes for Golden Tate, right? It was very hard for me to project anything for Tate. If we take a look back at his last 4 years from 2016 to 2019, there's definitely a decrease and a drop off in all of his numbers, whether you're talking about total receiving yards, total targets, the balls he's catching, and touchdowns. There's definitely a decrease. I will say, though, to kind of play devil's advocate, last year, there was definitely a decrease because of his 4-game suspension. I think if Tate played in those 4 games, he probably has a 1,000-yard season. Who knows? But the age is a factor, and Golden Tate is not on the right side of 30. They're going to keep him in the slot. He's not going to be targeted this much, and he did end up with less yards than I wanted him to, and honestly, Tate might have a better season than what I'm projecting. I do believe that, because this is what I got. I think he's going to get 60 targets, 40 receptions for 597 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns. Now, he does have the best average here with 15 yards per reception here and a 66 catch percentage, because he's not going to be targeted that much. So the defensive backs, they're not exactly going to be paying as much attention to him. I definitely think it's going to pay into him catching the ball a lot more. And also, Golden Tate probably has the most talented hands on this wide receiving core. We remember a couple of crazy catches he made last year, from the juggling catch in the Patriots game to the crazy one-hander against the Cowboys. Tate has some pretty safe hands. And in terms of the yard per reception thing, he's definitely still, in my opinion, the best receiver in the league when it comes to yards after the catch. He's just a maestro at that. I think he'll continue that, especially with his position in the slot. Maybe he has a better season than this, maybe he doesn't. But overall, this is what I think the stats for the key players of the Giants are going to look like in 2020, at least on the offensive side of the ball. Let me know what you guys think. Which player did you think I did completely correct? Which player did you think I did completely wrong? Does Saquon have this kind of season? Does Daniel Jones have this kind of season? Does Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard prove me wrong and they turn out to be 1,000-yard receivers? And does Darius Slayton have this? Put your thoughts down below. I'll be happy to hear them. And this video has been long enough. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. I'll catch y'all in the next one.